Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. We promised you a double-barreled Mind Your Banners this week, and we will fulfill that promise this afternoon. With me is Mike Niziolek from the Bloomington Herald-Times, and this will be a Mind Your Banners that is much more basketball-focused. Mike made the point yesterday. Number one, we have a lot of ground to cover when we talk about football these days. Number two, we were shooting our usual Wednesday show on the day of a men's basketball game, so it just made sense to us to kind of break basketball out into its own thing. We'll probably go about half hour today, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. We'll talk about the women first. Mike's covered multiple IU women's games so far this season, and then we'll kind of dig into what's going on the men's side with Darren DeVries. But Mike, how are you? It's been so long since last I saw you.
Yes, it feels like it's been forever.
It feels like it's been at least 14 hours, maybe 16 hours. We will start with just kind of the women's side of things. Terry Morin's team is 3-0. They have a game, Sunday at Florida State, which might be, I think it's probably fair to say at this point, their most challenging non-conference game, especially given it's away from home. We knew this team would, at least for a while, look like a work in progress. They undeniably have looked like that. I think what was the score at the end of the first quarter of the Marshall game was 9-6. On the other hand, there I think are still some encouraging sort of signs here. Shea Chetsky has looked really, really good. She's averaging over 23 points per game. I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Zanaya Soka-Guman is averaging almost a double-double. UCLA transfer, right? I'm not losing my mind on that.
Yeah, UCLA, yeah.
And so, you at least kind of see where I think the building blocks are with this group. But again, as we expected, undeniably a bit of a work in progress, at least for a while.
Yeah, to me, it's like if you squint, you see what Terry Morin's envisions for this team, like where they could be pretty good, where they could be pretty decent. But right now, they're probably not there yet. Because you talk about Lanae Beaumont's a good example. Like she's still coming back after missing last season, like all of last season. So she's got some rust she needs to knock off. You've got a freshman in the starting lineup, Nevaeh Caffey, who's I think's got a really bright future. Terry Morin was
I think Terry Morin agrees with you based on what
she went as far as you'll hear her with praise. Specifically, I think the offensive side has a really ways to go with her, but defensively she's ready-made. She's got the athleticism, and you can kind of see it. But at the same time, like them coming to get like Marshall, that game was really, really ugly, and it's hard to understand. You can't understate how poorly they handled kind of the 2-3 zone, the full court press, trying to close out the game in the final minutes. It really looked ugly. But this team hasn't played together. They're young, and so there's a lot of work to be done. And Shea, you mentioned, it was interesting. She had I was in covering the Penn State game, missed that game, but she had, I want to say like 30-something.
I think it was 35 against UIC.
Yeah, then the next night, against Marshall, she doesn't attempt a three-point shot. Only like the third game in her career that's happened. And, not a lot of open looks, but she's probably got to be more aggressive. And it's got to be more, assertive. Terry talked about it in relation to her leadership on the floor, being vocal, getting players where they need to be, being more demanding. But, she's got to be kind of the alpha on this team because there isn't one. And then you talked about Z, and I like her game, is interesting. Like she's a really athletic post, runs the floor really well. It's got some moves on the inside, but it's raw. It hasn't played a lot, and you can kind of see it. She picked up 2 fouls in the first 3 minutes the other night. So a lot of work to do. So all that being said, they don't have a lot of margin for error in the non-conference, though. It's a very easy non-conference schedule. But I think they can't lose more than 2 games if they really want to compete for the NCAA tournament, because there's going to be some rocky moments, I think, in the Big Ten. Florida State will be an interesting sort of measuring stick. I think the biggest thing for them last year, they lost a couple games early, lost to Harvard, lost to Butler. You escape that Marshall game ugly, but it's a win. And so you can kind of learn as a learning moment and not have it hurt you. But very much a work in progress. Different than the men, right? Men are going through the same thing where they're working through everything, but they're a more ready-made product, and maybe the extra stuff that they had in the preseason with the Puerto Rico trip, extra exhibition game, I just feel like they've sort of worked through some of that where the women are still sort of in that process.
Do you think that you and I have talked about the non-conference schedule and that it doesn't have a lot of heft, this year?
No.
Do you think that could benefit this team though? Like the idea of like that, because you talk about the men, and I think you can clearly see Darren DeVries' team, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But I think you can clearly see the benefits of their summer and their practices and their preseason tour, and that maybe some of those kinks that we're talking about, they got out while no one was looking. Now, they are obviously an older team, a more experienced team, even if they haven't been together a lot. But still, that sort of like I had a buddy who flew, was on a test crew in the Air Force, and they would take planes up before they went into service, and they call them gremlins. They would take the plane up, and they would look for all the gremlins in the system and get them out so that nothing popped up when the plane was actually out, in service. Do you feel like this non-conference, maybe, yes, it's easier, maybe you're not drawing a lot from it on Selection Sunday or whatever, but like it allows them to get some of those gremlins out the way that really pushing themselves might not. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because I think it's the same thing, like that Baylor game that Indiana played. Like they got to work through that end of game stuff where this was the first time Indiana, the women, got to do that against an opponent, and they had to do it live, sort of in a real game, obviously. And I think one of the things Terry, probably wanted to avoid was this team getting discouraged, right? Like if they got kind of their heads beat in the non-conference or took a bunch of losses, and then kind of in the Big Ten, you're kind of unsure yourself. I think it's going to be a lot of building this team's confidence up. Like after a game like that, she wants to, it still can do it in after a win and not a loss. And so, I think it's kind of just a multi-part thing. You need the wins, first of all, just bottom line in a non-conference. And second of all, to try to build this team up in the non-conference and not get them discouraged because they're going to struggle at times. But to try to do it while you win those games, I think is kind of the key point. Because it's just a number of wins. I compare it to kind of what Oregon, the women, have done the last couple of years where they've really been lax schedules in the non-conference, and then all they got to do is go 500 or close to it in the Big Ten schedule, and they made the tournament. Did it last year. It worked when they were rebuilding, and that's kind of, I think, just the goal here to extend that tournament streak. Well, the signing day was yesterday. Really big signing class for them. Really talented signing class. You see where this is going, and you've got some building blocks now, but to try to make the tournament in the meantime.
You talk about building blocks, and I'm curious for your thoughts. I'd be curious for, Hoop has been kind of talking about some of the young players that he likes to look up on this team, particularly at the guard spot. Like, if you sort of know, at least to a certain extent, if you're Indiana, what you have in Shea Chesky, what you have in Soka Guman, like who do you think is likeliest to be that third, maybe both ends of the floor impact player, if there is one that can like emerge and kind of give Indiana like a third option? Again, if we're thinking that Indiana is going to use the bulk of these first 2 months to maybe develop and almost like the process is going to have to supersede the results, because the results probably aren't going to be worth a whole heck of a lot once you get to tournament time. But the process might be. Who do you think is likeliest to emerge from that process as an impact player for this group?
Well, I think it's split, because I think it's Lene probably on the offensive end. You want her to get kind of shake off the rust and be sort of, in double-digit score every night, being able to kind of get the offense that she wants, be confident. And but on defense, it's Caffey on defense, but she's there already on defense. Like, she's such a good on-the-ball defender, such a good perimeter defender. Like, that part of her game doesn't need to be coached up. Like, I mean, she's got it. She's got the attitude as well. Offensively, she was doing things that a freshman does, taking some wild shots, got a rebound on her own miss, but then made another mistake by just forcing another missed shot. And she did that like twice against Marshall. And, Morin just shakes her head and it's like, well, we're working through some things. It's like, we could work on that. And so that's really funny. The Ryan Day comment. But she's there defensively, and I think that's going to help this team, because ultimately they're going to have some rough night shooting like they did against Marshall, and they can play through it if you hold a team under 30% shooting. That's a formula that you can lean on. Defense travels, and Caffey's really good. So I think it's kind of a split thing. But Boma, obviously, I think because she's the future she's going to be the leader here next year as well. So you want to kind of get her as to be the piece you need on offense to kind of get that. You need 3 reliable scorers, like you said, and Shea's probably obviously at the top. Z and Lene probably rotate based on the night.
And it also, I mean, like it helps, especially with a freshman, but just in general, it often helps if you're sort of the point of your attack defensively is not necessarily someone you count on for offense, right? Like that, that you, if you can get away with it, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but sometimes you'd rather be able to tell that player the focus, use all your effort, all your focus at the defensive end of the floor. Anything you give us offensively is just a bonus. Just, go down there and try to limit your mistakes and make smart plays and just trust like the system. But I remember when Tom Crean had Victor Oladipo in the balancing act, he would try to strike during, in games where there are times where he needed Victor Oladipo to be Indiana's best offensive player, and there were times where he needed Victor Oladipo to be Indiana's best defensive player, but he knew that he couldn't ask for both at the same time for 40 minutes, or he would just wear a player thin. So there's kind of that advantage too.
Yeah, you're not going to ask a freshman to be your best scorer and your best defender at all times. I mean, that's a tough. I mean, that takes a player, but she's got a real big makeup in terms of her high school resume. Had just tons of success, and so she's a veteran. In that sense that she knows like the championship level expectation. I think that's why she earned kind of that starting spot. I think the key too, they're going to need more from their bench. Maya Makaluski, former Miss Indiana basketball, kind of struggling to. I mean, she's kind of one of the first players off the bench. Phoenix Stotine is the other one, and Stotine's a transfer from was it Alabama, Arkansas? What was it? Yeah. Arkansas.
I'll look it up. Okay,
either way, but they're the kind of the first players off the bench, and they're not giving them a ton right now, especially on the offensive end. And Maya's probably kind of one of their best outside of Shea, like 3-point, 3-point threats, and she's still figuring things out. They really like her, and I think they think more reps will get her to that moment, and that's where probably the Big Ten part of the schedule is where you kind of need her to give a little more off the bench, because right now the bench, Morin loves to ride her starters, but I thought this year would be the year where you kind of try to get some more people looks because you're trying to get them kind of in the flow of things, and that hasn't happened yet.
I mean, it's a pretty tight like rotation of 8 right now. Like if you look at the minutes numbers, there are only 8 players averaging more than 4 minutes. I know it's 3 games, but more than 4 minutes per game. There's only 7 players averaging 15 or more. 3 of your 4 starters are averaging at least 28 minutes a night. So, I mean, it is.
Shea played 40 against Marshall.
Yeah.
So,
it is familiar, right? Like we've seen this from Terry Moore and coach teams. Shifting to the men's side, Darren DeVries' team is also 3-0. Indiana's look pretty impressive, especially offensively. I know I think we both kind of wrote about that after the second straight 100-point game. This is also the first time in more than 2 years Indiana's been in the top 20 nationally in KenPom. Hoosiers have scored 98 or more points in all 3 of their games. I don't expect necessarily the 3-point shooting at the volume that it's going to continue this year. But at the moment, as you pointed out last night on Press Row, they are on pace to set a single season record for made threes. What strikes me about this team more than anything else is they play smart basketball and they have a lot of different ways to score. And that will cover up a lot of cracks like that in my experience, teams that don't make a ton of mistakes, that make a lot of smart decisions and don't, and have a lot of different, can't be pigeonholed in how they want to score the basketball or who they want to score it through, tend to have pretty high floors. Now, how high the ceiling is, we'll see. But I think the floor is higher for this team than maybe I thought it was earlier on.
Well, to me, we've kind of been, I've asked you kind of throughout the off season, like tournament team, because you saw them every step of the way, right? Puerto Rico, exhibitions and everything. And I don't think we're probably asking that question anymore unless the health becomes an issue. Like, I just think this team is, and I think Darren DeVries has talked about it, further along than maybe he expected in terms of chemistry, in terms of buying into what the coaches are selling. And it's really been impressive. I think there's going to be bumps in the road, but as long as this roster is healthy, they clearly have enough talent to get to the tournament, and they're clearly going to win. We talked about kind of the key being those 50-50 games in the Big Ten, right? If they play like this, and not every night they're going to shoot the ball 50%, 60%. But I'm saying if they play like this with that sort of defensive intensity that they've had, that's waned at times, but it's been there when he's kind of got on them, and the unselfishness kind of sticks. And maybe it's not 20 assists a night, but somewhere, they're still sticking to the philosophy Tater Conaway talked about, passing up good shots for great shots. I think this team has a really good chance, and it's been really impressive to watch in terms of just, look, when we talk about historical, you've been here much longer than me and seen basketball that was sort of very much the opposite of this, and we're at the front end of one of some of these last things that have happened in terms of 3 games in a row with 20 assists, 3 games in a row with double-digit 3-pointers. And I mean, these are historical anomalies because they happened a couple of times sort of 10 years ago. But even before that, these weren't happening. 190 points in 3 straight games. What say you sort of about what you've seen? I mean, it's been a minute.
Yeah, I'm looking at like the assist numbers specifically. So last year, and I like, we don't need to make this entire year about like a referendum on last season versus this season. The last year they had 509 assists as a team. At their current pace, they're going to finish with 777. Like that is such a dramatic difference in the way the offense operates and the way the ball moves.
And for people that didn't see, this is the first time with 3-game stretch with 20 or more assists since 2012, 2013. The stats, there's a couple of years that you can go back further than that to see the stats. And there's been no games of 4 in a row, like within the last 20 years. And so I don't know if IU has those stats. I'll ask to see if there is a stretch of 4 games with 20 assists or more. I mean, really impressive. And 73 assists on 103 field goals and a 2.8 assist to turnover ratio, but seating the floor.
Their assist rate, which is obviously just the percentage of their baskets that is assisted, is 9th nationally right now. Assist to made field goals is 9th nationally.
What's just assist per game ranked? I think it was 3.
I don't have per game. I'm looking at their KenPom stats, which is tempo free stuff. But I mean, still, it's these are huge numbers that, as you said, are probably going to come down. But I do think, and this is like what I wrote last night, what I do think they illustrate is a team that has like a really implicit level of trust and belief in itself, that has that chemistry that we wondered how quickly can that come together, given the roster is brand new. None of these players had played together before, although I guess, technically Connor Enright and Tucker DeVries had. But like in general, there was so much that was going to be new. There was so much that this group was going to have to figure out. That there is already that implicit trust, that there is already that, it's like I don't mean to say, I'm not saying it's a joke. Like, we've seen twice in 3 games already alley-oops thrown off the backboard. Like that is like a level of just sort of like in sync that I am surprised, even though they looked good at times in Puerto Rico, I am surprised that in competitive game settings, they are that far along in terms of how well they communicate, their chemistry, their togetherness. And when you pair that to the fact that I think it is also tangible, how often you can just tell this group makes smart decisions. Guys just make the right decision. I think I've referenced it here. I know I've referenced it on our good friend Mike Glasgott's show. There was a moment in the Marion game that kind of epitomized it for me, where there was a loose ball, Marion possession, and there was a loose ball bouncing toward the sideline. A Marion player dove for it, and Tatum Conaway reached out and just tapped it into the air. And he didn't dive for it. And that's what you would, like, a young player would have dove on the floor, right? Like, that's what you teach. Dive for the loose ball. But he said, I don't need to. I just need to get it out of the way of this guy. He'll dive under it, and then I'll run past him and straight onto a bouncing ball. And I think Indiana had a 2-on-1 break. It is how much raw basketball these guys have played is showing up, I think, night in, night out. Like, there are probably more than 1,000 games on this roster, right? They are number one. Use KenPom. KenPom has a D1 experience metric. They're number one nationally in experience. What has surprised me is how like how quickly they seem to have found that intersection between all their individual skills and their individual games and their individual experiences, and how they feed in together, if that makes sense. And like already, using Pomeroy as an example, I think they were projected at 18-13 in his initial, sort of like release preseason. And of course, the data's got to wash out, and these things change. They're most volatile at the beginning of the year, but already their projected record is up to 22-9. So like that's like already they are 3 to 4 wins better than what the computers thought they might be in the preseason. And I think, to your point earlier, the eye test bears that out.
So well, let me ask you to frame it this way. So the Indiana's topped 100 points twice, obviously. Top 90 points for 3 straight games for the first time since 2007, 2008. They already have, this is pretty amazing. They already have as many 100-point games DeVries does in 3 games as Mike Woodson had in his entire tenure in regulation. He had one other one that went to overtime, and Archie Miller's tenure. Archie Miller had 2 games with 100 points. Is that an indictment of the previous teams, or a something that reflects this team's offensive prowess? Both? Do you overrate it by saying like, that's pretty crazy? I mean, both those.
No, I think it's both.
Where do you fall in that?
I think it's both, because on the one hand, you can see so many of the shortcomings of previous roster decisions in terms of, not having, and roster decisions plus scheme decisions. Like Archie Miller wanted to run motion-based stuff, but he didn't have players that could shoot. At times, Mike Woodson had guys that could shoot, like DeMar Bates, like Miller Kopp. Hoop says we're not allowed to say Mike Woodson's name. Unfortunately, he is a former Atlanta Hawks coach.
It's not Voldemort.
He's also a member of the Hawks family. So I will always respect Mike Woodson that way. Yeah. But in all seriousness, Woodson at times had guys that could shoot. Right, he had Miller Kopp, he had DeMar Bates, but the system was just not structured to get guys consistently clean looks that they liked. And like, how many times do we talk about feeling like Indiana just needed to shoot its way into some rhythm, and they just wouldn't do it because they just wouldn't take threes? I mean, it is undeniably sort of a referendum on both roster and tactical decisions that came before, personnel and tactical decisions that came before. And also it is, and through 3 games, but like, listen, they only made 4 threes and they still scored 76 points against Baylor. I saw a season ticket holder I know last night at halftime, and we were talking about it. And he's a former manager from back in the day, and so he knows basketball pretty well. And we were both just talking, like, if you score 76, even in an exhibition setting where you only hit 4 threes, like, that's impressive. Like, that's real offense. It's one thing to score a bunch of points when all your threes are going in at home. It's another thing to miss a bunch of threes, to get the shots you're looking for and still not make them, and still be able to score at that volume, get to the free throw line, finish around the rim, whatever. That's why I say I think this team has multiple ways of scoring. You can't pigeonhole them and say, well, if the threes don't go down, you're screwed. This is all what Darren DeVries promised. Like, from his opening press conference, it was, this is how fast we play. We look for these kinds of shots. This is how the ball needs to move. All that stuff. But I think, to your point, I think even DeVries is maybe a little bit surprised that it has progressed as rapidly as it has, frankly, that this group, because, and again, maybe I would be curious if this season continues to progress in the direction that it's going, and maybe we wind up in a situation where we're looking at Indiana in a month or two and they're a top 20 team and they're clearly on course for the tournament. I'd be curious if we get it in a candid moment from Darren DeVries. Did he have some light bulb moments even behind closed doors in the offseason, like some of these practices he's talked about where they had like charted 31 assists and 2 turnovers or whatever? But I think even he feels like maybe this is further down the road than he expected to be with this group.
And so here's one other question. So we've talked kind of about the assists and offense. The other numbers I kind of looked at were the 3-pointers. So 38 made 3-pointers on 80 attempts, shooting 47%. That's probably obviously going to come down. First time the Hoosiers have made 10 or more 3-pointers in 3 straight games since December 2016. Were you here for that stretch?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is the first time IU made at least 14 3-pointers in consecutive games since November 2005. You were also here for that.
That would have been my freshman year. I think I had season tickets my freshman year because I obviously wasn't working at the IDS yet.
No, I'm just teasing. But so as we were kind of talking out, you say on pace. They're on pace for 393 pointers.
Yeah, which would be a single season program record.
Single season record 345. They've only knocked down 300 in the season two different times. 2014, 15, 15, 16. Obviously, the raw production will probably come down a little bit. But I mean, the shot attempts will probably go up. They're only shooting 26 attempts per game, so I mean, they're going to keep going. They're going to keep this is like part of their identity. They're not going to probably shoot 46%. Do they set the single season record? Yes or no?
I think I need to see them keep this pace against high major competition because like 2 of the 3 games have been at home, and. Because
to me, if they struggle, like even if they have off nights, they're still going to shoot their way through it. They're not going to.
I would also say like the first thing that goes when your team starts getting tired is 3-point shooting. So like if they can't get their depth back, which they're starting to. Nick Dorn played last night. We don't quite know where those. I think the next question is at least one of those 2 guards, Restich or Drake. We don't quite know where they are. I think if Indiana can get one of them healthy and into the rotation, I think like they'll be okay for like the time being. You don't need all 13 contributing all the time.
Right.
It certainly seems like they want Achimavich to redshirt based on the fact that we have not seen him in a competitive game yet. But if as you say, the injuries do kind of.
Yeah, barring if this roster stays healthy, I'm saying like.
But my point is from a 3-point shooting perspective, it's got to get healthy too. Like they've got to get deep enough that they're not that legs don't go in February and suddenly it slumps. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to say they will, but I certainly think it is possible. It is not. I don't think anybody can watch this group, and obviously not many of us were in Puerto Rico, but we can see it in Puerto Rico. We've seen it in
Puerto Rico. You haven't mentioned that. You haven't mentioned that.
It's relevant to this conversation. So, yeah, I will mention. I'll mention it again. Saw it in Puerto Rico.
All you talk about is Bad Bunny. It's getting a little tiresome.
It would have been great to go to a Bad Bunny concert while we were there. But unfortunately, we were busy.
The Super Bowl halftime.
That's true. But I'm probably going to be busy that night, too. No, I mean, listen.
Does Kurt Cincinnati's team go to the Super Bowl?
Can you stop interrupting me, for God's sake?
Kurt Cincinnati's teams go to the Super Bowl? Do you have news? Yeah.
Mesmer actually says it here. I was about to kind of make this point. He said, I think Louisville will show us what we wanted to see, that more depth is a wonderful thing. Like that Louisville game's kind of the next one that I've got pinned. Like Indiana should probably win every game between here and there. I know Minnesota's on the road, but as things stand, that feels like a game Indiana should win. Louisville's going to be happy if you watch some of that Kentucky game. Louisville's going to be happy to play at the same pace Indiana is. That might be like a 102 to 95 kind of game, which talk about, getting everybody warmed up for the Big Ten, for a Big Ten championship game that might be like 13 to 10. But I certainly think it's possible. And I think, again, the key for me is you can't pigeonhole the ways this team scores. It's not just 1 or 2 players. And it's not just 1 or 2 ways of scoring. They score on back cuts, they score with ball movement, they score with shooting, they score in transition. It's a very well constructed offense now. And I do close with this, not as like a word of warning, but just to acknowledge that that they're not perfect. The defensive and the rebounding issues are going to stay. Like those are not going away. And if you're struggling. If you need some come to Jesus about the way you're rebounding the ball against Milwaukee, which is a good Horizon League team, but it's still a Horizon League team, then it's going to be a bigger problem against high major competition. It's going to be a bigger problem in conference play. And it is a reminder that there are probably going to be some nights where Indiana is going to have to outscore some of its weaknesses.
Just to talk about what. I don't know what the question is.
Your observations of Indiana defensively. I know you weren't in Puerto Rico where I was.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Don't have the knowledge base that you do. No, yeah. I think what defensively, obviously the rebounding is an issue. I think the one possession that Darren DeVries kind of almost lost his mind. They had 3 offensive rebounds. Milwaukee did on 1 possession. and he just sort of threw up his hands and walked down the bench as like gross. And some of that size, and but that was what they kind of gave up when they constructed the roster. I mean, I think they knew that. So that's not a surprise. I think the encouraging thing is when they, and it was lagging in the first half last night, there in the second half, was there in the first half against, was it Marquette, and maybe lagged a bit in the second half. Like the defensive intensity, like when it's on, the team is very, very good. And when they're making the right decisions on defense and hustling, they're very effective. And so I think they need to sustain it, and they need to play full games. And as the competition gets better, maybe that sort of like lights the fire, especially in Big Ten play. So if he can get that for 40 minutes from his group, I think they're going to be okay. I mean, they're still going to have those deficiencies, and some teams, they're going to just be bad matchups, and they might have to overcome them, simply by other ways, like 3-point shooting, like we've talked about. But like, I think the positives have balanced out the negatives in my mind. Like, I think the biggest cheer Conaway got, you mentioned kind of his going for a loose ball. That was last night, where in the backcourt, he kind of forces the steal, dives it. I think it ends up going off Milwaukee. They get the ball, they get the extra possession. That's how you counter not like losing some possessions on second chance points. Tucker DeVries did that. I think it was in the exhibition twice in the backcourt, forcing a turnover on back-to-back possessions. That's how you counter that. So I don't think this team's without
limiting your own turnovers. That's the other thing, is like this team has been so far very, very good keeping ball. Like, and so you're not giving away free possessions. You can, because you said if they can sustain it for 40 minutes. I mean, in some of these games, they may only need to sustain it for like 20 minutes because especially at home, like if you go quiet offensively for 7 or 8 minutes against this team, like if you have a stretch where you only score like 6 points in 8 minutes, like there's a decent chance you're going to look up at the scoreboard and they're ahead by 17, and then it's like it doesn't matter what.
Football in the comments, and it's kind of like the football team, right? Like if you're I mean, they'll run away from you, and if you don't. If you start doing that kind of stuff, get sloppy and things like that.
But there'll be a couple nights where also just like the sheer offensive fight. Like I think a prediction I may have made on the podcast, or at least to you, is I think they'll hit 23s in a game at least once this season, which is something that
absolutely.
That's something Indiana's never done. The record is
so you're saying they'll set the single game record.
I've already predicted it, whether it was here or somewhere else. I predicted they'll set the single game record at some point this season.
Okay. Mark it down.
But the
EJ Williams prediction for the basketball team. Your EJ Williams prediction for
there will be a couple nights when they just can't get it right defensively and they'll lose and they'll get swamped. But there will also be a couple nights where good teams just get absolutely overwhelmed, especially in Bloomington, but maybe even on the road. And the last thing I would say, just kind of to kind of put a bow on this podcast, is in my experience, when you get to the attritional part of the season, the end of your conference schedule, tournament play, NCAA tournament play, teams that make smart plays, don't make mistakes, and score the ball are ones that nobody wants to match up with, because they tend to be the teams that can survive a lot of different matchups on a short turnaround in tournament play. Because, if you're game planning for this team and you only have 36 hours to do it, where do you want to start? Because they can score in a lot of different ways through a number of different players. They make their threes, they make their free throws, they don't turn the ball over, and they don't waste possessions. So anyway, any final words?
No, I think we got it.
Well, those are final words.
Those are final words.
He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. We'll be back Saturday afternoon for our weekly post-game show. We'll be together for the first time in several weeks for the post-game show. We won't be staring at each other through a screen like we are right now. Thank you, everyone who jumped in with us today. Thank you, everyone who listened. Wherever you get your podcast, please remember to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, to rate and review us on your various podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. For the Bloomington Herald-Times, for the Indianapolis Star, he's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners for November 13th, 2025. Thank you so much for listening.